Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. First off, I apologize for the length of the program. It will be a little longer than usual, but we will take no offense if anybody has to leave early. The program will not be a typical organ recital. It will not be presented in the usual manner as you've already seen. We have things up on the screen, so you will not be seeing me up on the screen. So if you want to see me playing the music, you'll have to watch the video after Matt gets it up online. I'll direct your attention to the screen now, and this year, of course, there have been many celebrations surrounding the 500th anniversary of the Reformation. Today's program is about gaining more understanding and appreciation of that special period of the Church's history and its significance for our faith and worship today in 2017. It was 500 years ago, with his publication of the 95 Theses, that this stubborn monk and towering thinker is given credit for starting the series of events that launched the Protestant Reformation. But the rumblings of church reformation had already begun as Europe was transitioning from the late medieval period into the Renaissance. The stark medieval quality of the Agincourt Hymn transports us back to that historical period. Sometimes called the Agincourt Carol, it was originally an English folk song sung as a ballad recounting the 1415 Battle of Agincourt. It's also interesting to note that the melody of this 15th century folk song is actually found in the hymnal as the hymn tune for 2 Epiphany hymns. Secular music did influence the tunes that would later be used in the church, and I thought we'd take a few moments to touch on some more music from another part of this historical period. As dance became an important part of Renaissance society, court dances were performed by the upper classes, the high society. I'll be playing 2 court dances, the Gaillarde and Mohrentanz. These tunes were originally arranged by the Renaissance instrumentalist and composer Tilman Susato. Active as a town instrumentalist, he played trumpet, flute, recorder, crumhorn, and sackbut. Susato arranged these tunes as dance pieces in 4 parts to be played on these diverse instruments. Played on the organ, of course, these dances won't sound as they did on these instruments back in the day. But perhaps the flute stops on the organ will give us some idea how the Gaillarde might have sounded played on the Renaissance flutes and recorders. In sections of Mohrentanz, I'll use some of the organ's reed stops like bassoon and oboe to replicate reed instruments like the crumhorn. 2 Renaissance dances by Tilman Susato. The word Renaissance is French. It means rebirth. There was a renewed interest in knowledge. There were also changes in theological and political views. Many Europeans thought the church had become too powerful and wealthy. Complaints and unhappiness with the church led to the religious reform movement we call the Reformation. During the Renaissance, the flourish in art and culture were at the peak in the society. Martin Luther and the Reformers responded to the gospel by pressing music and the arts into the church service. It was during the Reformation that hymns were introduced for congregational singing. Out of all the reformers, Luther probably had the most appreciation for music. He loved music and was himself a musician playing several instruments and composing music. Luther is quoted to have said, "Next to the Word of God, the noble art of music is the greatest treasure in the world." Now, Luther was quite a character and was known to speak his mind. So he also said, "I have no use for cranks who despise music, because it is a gift of God." A person who does not regard music as a marvelous creation of God must be a clodhopper indeed and does not deserve to be called a human being. In Luther's day, music of the church was dominated by the priest and the choir, the professionals. The person in the pew had little, if any, involvement in the liturgy and music. Luther changed all that. He translated the Latin Mass into German so it could be understood by all. Instead of the priest and the choir controlling worship, the congregation was to participate in word and song. His passionate beliefs led Luther to write more than 30 hymns. In the centuries that followed, some of his hymns would influence composers like Bach, Handel, and Mendelssohn. One of those hymns is Vom Himmel hoch da komm ich her, from heaven above to earth I come. One account tells us that Luther was accustomed every year to prepare Happy Christmas Eve's entertainment for his family and wrote this Christmas hymn in 1534 for the Christmas celebration in family circle. Luther's hymns were meant to convey information, and the original chorale had at least 15 verses telling the entire Christmas story. It appears that Luther first set his text to a then popular secular song and dance tune, but became disappointed with the secular associations and eventually wrote the tune we see here. This tune is used in 2 organ settings by the German Reformation composer and organist Johann Pachelbel. The first is a simple, bright setting with the tune and longer note values played by the feet on the organ pedals. The music on the manuals above it is light and joyful. In the second setting, the hymn tune enters in the pedal about halfway through it as the manual parts break into rapid flourishes. The hymn tune, Vom Himmel hoch, followed by the settings of Johann Pachelbel.
Nun freut euch, lieben Christen, dear Christians, one and all rejoice. Martin Luther wrote these words in 1523. They were the beginning words of the first hymn that Luther had written for congregational use. It seems Luther based the tune on a 15th century folk song, since the beginning notes of both the folk song and the hymn are nearly the same. Earlier this year, composer Kevin Hildebrand wrote a piece on this hymn tune to celebrate the 500th anniversary of the Reformation. As you're listening to the several movements or parts of this partita, there will be slides showing some more of the many wonderful Martin Luther quotes, as well as scenes from Luther's city, Lutherstadt, or as it's commonly called, Wittenberg.
Mighty Fortress is Our God is one of the best known and loved hymns, especially of the Lutheran tradition. The text is based on Psalm 46. The tune is named Ein Feste Burg from the text's first line. 19th century musicologists questioned whether Luther actually wrote the melody, and some believed that the tune was from a tavern song. But more recent research indicates that this is not true. Luther was considered to be a good composer, and it's now generally acknowledged that he did write the famous tune to go with the words. It's important to note, though, that Luther's original tune differs from the common, more widely known and sung version. Here we see how the hymn appeared in an early printing of the piece, which is housed in the Luther House Museum in Wittenberg. At the top, we see the later, more common version of the hymn's first line. At the bottom is the version found in the early printing. The original melody is extremely rhythmic by the way it bends to all the nuances of the text. This rhythmic version is included in today's hymnals and is sung by some congregations. Probably for many of us, singing this more dance-like rhythmic version would seem rather strange since our modern ears aren't accustomed to hearing it this way. But in the time of the Renaissance, these rhythmic patterns were common. Ein Feste Burg has been used by many composers, including famous composers like Pachelbel, Handel, and Bach. The piece I've chosen to play, Partita on Ein Feste Burg, is by present-day composer Andrew Clark. I'll be playing 4 movements. The first is a pedal solo, followed by a light, playful scherzo, a lively, brisk vivace, and ending with Allegro moderato. I'll first play the rhythmic version of the chorale with the tune as it was originally composed by Luther, followed by 4 movements from Partita on Ein Feste Burg by Andrew Clark. Karen for inviting me. I'd like to thank Matt for his help with the video portion, and anyone else who had a hand in putting this together. I would most of all be appreciative and be remiss if I didn't thank you for sharing your noontime with me. Thank you, I appreciate it. So the tune Old Hundredth was not paired with any of Luther's hymns, but is supposed to have originated during the Renaissance, and it's probably due to the Reformation that we have come to know this very familiar hymn tune. The tune is usually attributed to the French Renaissance composer Louis Bourgeois. It receives its current name from an association with the 100th Psalm. Most times it is sung as the doxology and is one of the best-known melodies in all Christian musical traditions. Our final piece, based on Old Hundredth, is a toccata. This form of composition first appeared in the late Renaissance period. A toccata is a keyboard composition with sections of fast-moving notes. The hymn tune followed by toccata on Old Hundredth by Michael Burckhardt.